Sure. Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Okay. I, Ricardo Macedo, the chair of the San Ysidro School District Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. I would like to ask all members of the committee to mute their devices at this time. Committee members and the public shall participate in this meeting via teleconference. The public may view the meetings by accessing the YouTube link provided on the agenda. To listen to this meeting in Spanish, please call 1-901-201-4311 and enter the access code 73021-3061#. Again, to listen to this meeting in Spanish, please call 1-901-201-4311 and enter the access code 73021-3061#. Para escuchar esta junta en español, llame al 1-901-201-4311 y marque el código de acceso 73021-3061 gato. De nuevo, para escuchar esta junta en español, llame al 1-901-201-4311 y marque el código de acceso 73021-3061 gato. Members of the public are welcome to record this meeting using their own personal devices. The district will also make an audio recording available upon request to the district office. Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that this meeting is conducted pursuant to Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-2920. At this time, I'd like Chief Business Official Marilyn Adrianson to conduct roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Macedo. I will now conduct the roll call, starting with Mr. Holden Robbins.
Yes, here.
Mr. Manuel Lopez Jr.
Here.
Okay. Mr. Kenneth Johnson.
Present.
Mr. Larry Rodriguez.
Present.
Ms. Leticia Gomez.
Present.
Mrs. Gloria McKerney.
Present.
And Mr. Ricardo Macedo.
Present.
All members are present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. Now I'll request that each committee member respond to the following questions. I'm going to start off with Ms. McKerney. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Were you able to hear proceedings on this end until now?
Yes, I have.
Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes, I do.
Thank you so much. Now, Ms. Gomez, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. Were you able to hear proceedings on this end until now?
Yes, I was.
Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes, I do.
Thank you so much. Mr. Rodriguez, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Were you able to hear our proceedings on this end until now?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Mr. Johnson, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. I love that enthusiasm. Were you able to hear our proceedings on this end until now?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
I have a copy.
Thank you so much. Mr. Lopez, Manuel Lopez Jr., can you hear me well?
Yes.
Were you able to hear proceedings on this end until now?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes, I do.
Thank you so much. Mr. Robbins, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Were you able to hear proceedings on this end until now?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes.
Thank you all so much. Moving on to the item number 3, the agenda. And this is a voting approval agenda item. I will now ask each member if they have any corrections or additions to the agenda. Does anybody have any comments or changes to the agenda? If hearing none, I will go through the hearing none. I will now ask Ms. Adrianson for a roll call to vote.
Do we need to take a motion to approve the agenda?
A motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you so much.
That's Gloria McCurney.
Gloria McCurney, motion to approve the.
I second it.
And Larry second the motion. Ms. Adrianson, now could you ask your roll call and ask each committee member?
Okay, calling for a roll call vote for agenda item number 3, agenda, starting with Mrs. McCurney.
Aye.
Mrs. Gomez.
Aye.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mr. Robbins.
Yes.
And Mr. Macedo.
Yes.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry, 7-0. 7-0. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you so much. Moving on to item number 4. And we're going to do a flag salute. You will see a display of the flag on the screen. At this time, please mute your devices and we'll begin at 3. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. Thank you so much. Moving on to item number 5. This would be for public comment or communications. Mr. Francisco Mata, who is our public relations coordinator, are there any public comments at this time? Do we have Mr. Francisco Mata on?
No, Mr. Mata has not joined.
Would we know if there was any public comments submitted prior to our meeting?
There were no public comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Hearing none. Thank you, Ms. Adrianson. I will now move on to item number 6. We're going to have Mr. Jim DiCamillo from WLC Architects provide us with the update on the long-range master plan facilities. After the presentation, each board member will have the opportunity to make any questions or comments to Mr. DiCamillo. Mr. DiCamillo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
In the screen. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be back. Yeah, I'm going to give just a brief synopsis of where we are in the long-range master plan. Everybody can hear me, correct? Nod or thumbs up or whatever. We're at this important junction in the master planning process. We're sort of moving from process to product. And so what that means to you all is that shortly we will be producing the actual draft document of the master plan itself. What we've been doing this entire time is gaining input from stakeholders. So if I can, let me see if I can share my screen, right? And hopefully this will work because Pat and I tried it earlier today.
Yes.
So you've seen this presentation before, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but hopefully you can see my screen here, right? No, yes, no.
Not yet.
Not yet. Let's see what's happening. Let's try this a different way. It says I'm screen sharing. So let me see why that's not working.
Would you like for me to share, Jim?
Hang on a sec. We'll give it another try here. I don't know why that didn't come up. Should have. Hang on a second. All right. Share screen. You cannot screen share while another participant is sharing.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
That's probably the reason the agenda was up.
Go ahead, Jim. I stopped sharing.
There you go. That's it. Somebody blocked my share. It's like a card game. All right. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you've seen this presentation before, and I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but I think it always is a good reminder for everybody to, again, talk about where we're at, what we're doing. So again, I'm in charge of doing a facility master plan for the school district, which encompasses the entire boundary areas of the school district. And I've always transitioned to this slide because if I go back, you'll see that the vast majority of the district at the east end is open space and all of the schools are grouped at the west end. So again, in terms of process, the biggest thing that we do in a master planning process is to gather input from the stakeholders. So unique this time around, you'll see a lot of completes next to all of these various groups. So we have literally been around the district 4 or 5 times now talking to different groups of stakeholders. Some of them were public setting meetings like this, town hall, recorded multiple actual town hall. Others were more intimate Zoom meetings just with people at the school sites. So we met with all the principals first, then we met with the staff of every school. And now we're actually going around and meeting with the kind of in reverse order. We're going around and meeting with the school district departments. And I think our last one is scheduled for early next week. So we've literally spoken to everybody in the district and taken notes about all the various needs and desires for modifications to facilities across the district. So the input gathering part of this process is essentially complete. And the draft master plan is being prepared right now. In the meetings that we've had, we've gone over, and I'm not going to dwell on these, but they are critical. We've gone over what we call the guiding facility principles, which is an awkward acronym, but talks about the various topics that we have been speaking about with every meeting that we've had. So those who have sat in with meetings with me are very familiar with this acronym and the various topics and how it applies to each site or department at the district. So that's been key to the way that we talk about it. And then you may remember this slide as well, because this is key then to taking that input. And if I pull in input, I'm then going to push out a master plan. So how it gets pushed out in a master plan are these strategies for improving facilities across the district. And this is really important, this slide, because this is really how we then outline the chapter and verse of the master plan, which looks at 4 potential ways to improve your facilities. You don't have to do all 4 at every site. You might have only one thing that needs to be done at a particular school site or district site, but those remedies are really simple. They are to build something on the campus or facility that you don't currently have, renovate something that you currently do have, or maybe change its purpose or function. Third is improve the property itself, not inside a building, but actually fix up the site and grounds. And then the last one is really not really, as I say, construction at all. It's the improvement of the infrastructure that goes inside buildings, furniture, technology, and equipment. And so as the master plan is beginning to be prepared, it's all prepared around these 4 tenets, and each site is essentially assigned tasks, what most people will call, and we'll probably use the terminology in the master plan because people are comfortable with it, a project list. And so that's what's coming out of the master plan right now. And that project list is gelling even as we speak. We're continually massaging it at my office and in discussions with the district. Now, something that is really critical that I want to just dwell on just for a second here before I close is that in the meetings that we've had across the district, there have been many suggestions. Like I said, we're moving from process to product. And something for the Citizens Oversight Committee to always keep in mind is the language that surrounds Measure T and U, because your charge is actually not the master plan, but the bond as the bond committee. It's always important to remember this, because in our many discussions around the district, there have been suggestions that that have been about things that we have often had to say, well, that's not really a bond project. The bond language was very specific. So I want you to know, as somewhat your liaison architect from input into the community, we're pretty much sticking to a strict adherence in our discussions. We're taking all input, but the projects list that we'll be generating and have already started is based around Measure T and then this slide Measure U, which are worded slightly differently, but do put a guidelines, guardrails around what the project list would be able to undertake. And I think we've done a very good job with that. I think Marilyn will attest to that. We've sat, I think she sat in on probably 98% of the meetings, and it's always been around that. It's always been, that's a nice suggestion, but the school district isn't able to spend Measure T and U money on this sort of thing or that sort of thing. Not that the input wasn't good. So that's kind of where we're at right now. There is potential that we will be sharing the draft master plan maybe as early as the April school board meeting. At least that's our hope and target. And then what generally happens is not too dissimilar to what you just did with approving minutes and then moving on to a meeting itself. Generally, we recommend that the district board get a chance to sort of review that, look at it like a first reading, like a budget, give us feedback, and then we will modify the plan to finalize it before it becomes the new, long-range facility master plan for the school district. So that's where we're at in the process. We're at this kind of interesting precipice between collecting input and then turning that into the product that is the master plan. I will tell you, before I turn maybe some of this over to Marilyn, that the district conducted, at the behest of the board, a survey of the community. And so I was given all of that input as well. There were hundreds of responses to the survey, all very interesting. Read them all. I will say that in general, I don't see your master plan or what I would call the Measure TU bond program to be extraordinarily controversial, at least not in my opinion anyway. There's a great deal of consensus. We've seen a lot of same commonality to the comments that we've received. Very little in what I call the out and left field sort of input. It's all been, there's been a lot of agreement, a lot of consensus, even though all the input's being gained from disparate places. In other words, nobody's talking to each other. They're just giving independent input. So as a guy just reading the surveys, I have to say I was very impressed with the quantity of them and the quality of the input that we got back. And to find out that the input we got from the community was very much so in line with what we've heard from the various sites. So that's I don't know if people have questions for me right now. Marilyn was going to talk a little bit about the survey process since it was conducted through the district, but I'd be happy to take questions on the master plan itself.
Hi, Jim. This is Ricardo. Just more, since you mentioned that you received a lot of surveys from the community, what would you say would be the overarching theme from the surveys that you received that gives you that sort of sense of ease that they bought into it?
Yeah, a couple of examples. So if you go back to this slide, which is on the categories, it was almost, I would say, literally every comment I was able to insert into one of these categories. There was nobody who said we wanted a zoo. No, they were all things that I could easily say, oh, that's done by building something new. Oh, that's done by renovating something old. You get the occasional comment from the community. Again, they don't master plan for a living, about improving something in the schools that has nothing to do with facilities. That we kind of understand you're going to get. So no, in general, the vast majority of the comments were easily assignable to one of these categories. I think still, if I was to put a, if you've ever seen one of those diagrams where they set up the words and the bigger words get the most emphasis, that's called something. I don't know what that diagram's called, but the buyer site comes up a lot in the input that we got back, but all in a really positive way. So I would say that if anything really stands out, it would be that. And then maybe second tier to that on a bigger overarching thing is just how are we using the facilities and how are they all assigned with enrollment and balancing? Because you have some sites that are a little bit more impacted than others over the time when they were built. I would say those two are probably the biggest thing that we heard in coming through it in Maryland.
Yeah. We actually received from our parents roughly 400 surveys, and then from employees, roughly 200, and about 30 to 50 community members. So we have shared the survey with all of our BOC members. It's in your BOC book. But if you need a hard copy, we can send it to you as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting from the staff side, there's a lot of comments that would fall into the last category of upgrading furniture and technology. And that is obviously because they've just spent a year Zooming. So, they're now really talented at it. But I think, as I've said in previous meetings with the district, there's certain things that I think staff would like to see brought forward from what they learned from that process, and others that they'll be happy to leave behind. So yeah, a lot of staff comments, tended to be about the upgrading technology and things like that. The community was more in that buyer, district balance sort of discussion. Yeah.
Thank you.
But they were all I have to say, they were all very positive. The community, I mean, I was anxious to read them, not knowing what you would see, or like opening a Christmas present. And actually, it was very interesting to read them all because people really took it to heart in the surveys and the way that they understood, what the questions were. Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's kind of where we're at. Like I said, we're moving from, the best way I can synopsize where we are right now in a single sentence is we're moving from process into product, and it's going very well.
Thank you for the update. Ms. Adrianson, anything else to add?
No, that I just wanted to share the survey and that we're sharing it with you in your BOC backup documents. So like Jim mentioned, Mr. DiCamillo, that most of the survey results were in line with these 4 categories. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do any other board members have any questions regarding the process as far as the master plan facility, engaging community stakeholders? Anybody have any questions regarding that? The presentation Jim mentioned.
I do. I have a couple. I think maybe 1 or 2 are for Jim, and maybe 1 might be for the district, though. But when they speak about outreach to stakeholders, and I know Jim touched on a little bit about some of the teachers or whatever, but I know that's kind of a mushy definition. So I'm curious about who were the stakeholders that they reached out to?
At the school sites, I've had a meeting with every faculty, well, both classified and certificated staff at every school site, not individually, but globally. So I sat in on a staff meeting, 1 every couple of weeks, that was dedicated specifically to a school site hosted by the principal. So it was literally their monthly staff meeting. And we did that over about the last month and a half. So I virtually, air quotes, virtually visited every single school and talked to every single teacher. And then they were able to give me input in a separate Google Doc following that. So I received input from every site. They were essentially, a portal was opened where they could then give me feedback afterwards, having heard what we were looking for.
Okay. And there was no reason to reach out to the community or the students?
No, the community was reached out to via a town hall meeting. So there was a town hall meeting that was hosted actually by the school board, which I sat in on as a guest speaker. And so each, I want to say, Marilyn, it was 2 schools per meeting.
Yes,
I think is how we did it.
Yeah, we had like 5, probably 5 meetings. Yeah. And a
so
couple
that
of
was
those
an open
meetings.
meeting.
Yes, and were discussions on the buyer property.
Yeah, well, there were actually 2 dedicated to buyer, but the other sites were in pairs.
Yes.
And they were basically done as a adjunct school board meeting under the Brown Act. So I believe all of the board members actually were present at each one of those meetings, and Dr. Potter, of course, as well.
Okay. And then the other point you touched on had to do with the disposition of some of the like the furniture, the technology, or whatever, and some of the existing equipment and materials probably don't pertain to this committee, but expenditures going forward will. And I'm curious about and this is probably for the district more. How are those disposed, or how is it determined that they can be surplus or whatever, and then additional funds can be expended to purchase new stuff? And maybe this is not a quick answer, it might be a longer term one. So I'm just kind of curious if there's a process in place for disposition of these types of items.
Are you referring to disposal of items?
I'm not sure. I was just referring to what Jim touched on in his presentation, where he mentioned some of the like the furniture, some of the technology items. You know, I mean, how do you determine that you got to get rid of them, and then under the bond you're going to spend money to buy new stuff?
I think maybe the question is, if you sell a copy machine, can the proceeds from that copy machine sale be used on Measure T and U projects?
What normally happens per board policy, we take the items to the board if we plan on disposing items, and then we need to go, if we can, go back to the original way how the item was purchased. So depending how that, depending on which funds were used for the original purchase, that'll determine the revenue side of where we can post those revenues back.
So
to
the
which
original
fund.
purchase determines
Yes.
the path for the final disposition. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Adriansen, it may be helpful to share with the Bond Oversight Committee members the board policy for liquidation of assets.
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, for those questions. Anybody else has any comments or questions regarding the presentation?
Well, mostly this is a request for Marilyn to have, I need a hard copy of the BOC book, please.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Gomez.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any of our other board members have any questions? Okay, just want to make sure we give everybody the opportunity. Hearing none then. Mr. DeCamillo, thank you so much for your presentation and for the update, primarily. We appreciate your engagement.
Thanks. Everybody's been really great to work with. I appreciate everybody's willing to jump in. They've been super in terms of giving input.
Fantastic. And I'm just very happy to hear that community members and stakeholders are sending in those comments. That means a lot. That means that they're very engaged and that the district made a great effort to actually reach out to them. So that's fantastic. Great job. It doesn't always happen. So
one quick question.
Mr. Robbins.
Yeah, I was looking through the survey results and I was wondering if there was a version that had translations.
Translations?
Does that make sense?
Translate from Spanish to English?
In Spanish, yeah.
Oh.
Spanish to English?
Well, for me, it's Spanish to English.
Okay. I will find out and send it over and include it in the the BOC book.
I don't know if it would hurt to do it the other way, just for other parents.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Robbins.
Thank you. Great catch. Any other comments before we move on to item number 7? Okay.
If not, I'm gonna leave you guys to the rest of your meeting. Thanks for allowing me to share.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Well, that's great. Moving on to item number 7, This is a approval of the minutes that we had from our last board meeting on January 28th. Do you have any comments or questions before we move for approval of minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I move to approve.
That's Larry, Mr. Larry.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Seconds.
And Gloria, I believe, second the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Adjournment, if you could do a roll call for a vote.
Yes, calling for conducting a roll call vote for agenda item number 7, minutes, starting with Mrs. McKerney.
Yes.
Mrs. Gomez.
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mr. Robbins.
Yes.
And Mr. Macedo.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0.
Thank you so much, Ms. Adrianson. Moving on to item number 8, the expenditure report. Ms. Adrianson.
Item 8 is the expenditure report, which is from Ms. Pat. For the period of January 26, 2021 to March 5th, 2021. There hasn't been much activity. There hasn't been any expenditures to measures T or U, only interest has been earned. This first slide here is pretty much, it's a repeat from last meeting. Just gives you a background on measure T and overview. And the amount, this one is the amount of $52,985,000 for measure T. And we have issued $15,830,000, but the entire amount was went to pay off the 2017 COPS and some cost of issuance for measure T. So that it has been fully spent. And then the next slide is, or next presentation page 2 is measure U, is an overview. Measure U issuance of 55.5. And sorry, we issued 20 million, and we have a balance after the cost of issuance of 19.9 million, which includes some interest. And I think this slide, there we go. Mm-hmm. So there's the summary, the transactions, and then we have page 4. This is the overview from our 1997 Proposition C. So you can see that we have how, and then this is the bond series that were issued under Prop C, and then how it equals unissued of 0. And this is the balance as of March 5th, 2021, just some interest earned as well, $7,747.80.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Do any of our board members have any questions for Ms. Adrianson right now regarding the expenditure report? I know that really there's just nothing happening yet, but
not yet. It'll be quite involved later.
Later on, it's gonna
a lot of detail. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hearing none. Okay. Thank you so much. Now moving on to item number 9, and this would be covering the 2020-2021 Citizens Bond Oversight Committee Annual Report. This is a draft, and it's really for more discussion purposes. I'll pass it over to Ms. Adrianson for her presentation.
This is an annual report that's required per Ed Code. Mm-hmm. We anticipate presenting to the board on June 24th, 2021, and it's an update to the board on all the activities that the Bond Oversight Committee has been participating in. Ms. Pam, do you have the draft report that we can share real quick? So the background information on Prop C, the history there and all the issuances. So several series. It's pretty much the same as last year's presentation. And then we've added measures TNU, which is the overview, which is a total amount of $108,485,000 in GEO bonds. Several of the resolutions that were passed. So we have measures TNU, and then some background on the BOC, Bond Oversight Committee. And then we have our list of Bond Oversight Committee members and the group that they represent. And the Bond Oversight Committee responsibilities and all of the activity reports and agenda items and items that were discussed during our meetings. So we have 2 remaining BOC meetings, and then on May 20th, 2021, we will present the final annual report to this committee and along with the presentation.
Thank you so much. And
You're welcome.
And it really is same format layout that was presented last year.
Yes.
And it's just going to be just certain updates.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions at this time regarding the draft report?
I have a question, not specific to the report.
Sure.
It's more to the tenure of the committee members, because I know for myself, it was a 2-year commitment. And I'm wondering how does this all play out, because the 2 years are coming to an end here right about that time. And, you know, how do we keep moving forward? Are you going to re-solicit for new committee members, or can we continue to serve, or how does that work out?
Mr. Dorwood, could you please respond?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good
evening. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Under the bylaws and in the ed code, each committee member can serves 2-year terms, but can serve up to I believe it's 3 consecutive terms. So each member who may be coming up on, or any member who may be coming up on expiration of their individual term, can either be reappointed for an additional term, assuming they're still willing to serve. And obviously, if they are unable to serve or unwilling to serve, then that seat would potentially become vacant. So that's likely where you are in the process. And of course, each member has their specific dates and times they began serving on the committee.
Thank
That
you.
answer the question?
It does. And I think one of the issues the district might face is because we all started on the same date. So they're all going to expire on the same day. And the district can correct me if I'm wrong, but there may be some in the future, some desire to create overlapping so that not everybody expires at the same time. But I'm not sure if that's true or correct. I believe it is.
Yes, all members started at the same time. Yeah.
Larry, you bring up a great point, and I think this would be, I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think for a future agenda item that we could add for our next meeting in May, we could talk about succession planning. And I think it's just a great time to bring it up. So I appreciate that, Larry.
I think Mr. Macedo has a good point. I think for the next meeting, we should have that on the agenda about how to deal with that. And that way there's no lapse in service to the district, and the district is able to continue on. and demonstrate their efforts to keep the Oversight Committee in place. And there's, it just doesn't disappear after 2 years, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does any other board member have any questions before? I know we're going to move on to item number 10, but before we do that, any questions regarding the draft presentation? Okay, hearing none. Thank you all. Next item, item number 10. Any future agenda item requests? I think we're going to piggyback on what their discussion with Larry, and I suggest that we add succession planning to the agenda item for our next meeting in May. In addition to that, are there any other items that any board member would like to add for our Bond Oversight Committee meeting scheduled in May? And Ms. Adriansen, this is just from my clarification. I believe Jim is scheduled to be back in May. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. And I think we should just keep in mind, since the project is moving forward, the bulk of our work will start as soon, I'm assuming as soon as that there's a request or whether it's technology, whether it's furniture, whether it's maybe the other bigger ticket items. I think that's when we're going to start, I think, inquiring of when that timeline will start. So just keep that in mind, everybody. So I appreciate it. Okay. Since we're going to be adding succession planning, we do need to take a vote just to make sure that everybody's on board with that. I made the motion to approve succession planning for the next one. Is there a second for that?
I'll second. Leticia Gomez.
Leticia Gomez, second. Thank you so much. Ms. Adriansen, would you be so kind to do a roll call for each member?
Yes. Conducting the roll call vote for agenda number 10, future agenda items request, starting with Mrs. McKerney.
Yes.
Ms. Lopez.
Ms. Gomez, maybe?
Sorry, Ms. Gomez.
Yes.
Sorry. Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Are you sure not Miss Lopez?
I was thinking of
yes.
Miss Irene Lopez. Mr. Robbins.
Yes.
And Mr. Macedo.
Yes.
The vote passes 7-0.
Thank you so much, Ms. Adriansen. Moving on to item number 11. This is a big one. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
So, Mr. Lopez, motion to adjourn the meeting at 6:43. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
That was everybody. I think. Can you do roll call, please?
No. Who was the second? Was it Ms. Gomez?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Gomez. I will now conduct the roll call vote for agenda number 11, adjournment, starting with Mrs. McKerney.
Yes.
Ms. Gomez.
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mr. Robbins.
Yes.
And Mr. Macedo.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0. The meeting is adjourned.
All. Thank you all so much, Mr. Johnson. You made my day, made me smile. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody also for dialing in. This is great. Have a great rest of the day and night.
Likewise.
Thank you, everyone.